Thank you, Laura. As you know, today Prakash and myself are giving you a bit of a summary about the FutureTech summits and how it went, and if any findings of the summits. Following on from that, we will be accepting your questions and hopefully we'll be able to answer them. First of all, I'd like to give a quick introduction about myself. My name is Bataw. I'm the director of the Center of Excellence in Smart Construction. And with me is Prakash. You want to give yourself a quick introduction, Prakash?
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So I'm Prakash Senghani. I'm the Director and Head of Digital Delivery at JLL for MENA. So I look after the deployment of digital tools onto all of the programs and projects that we work on in the region.
Thanks, Prakash. Good to have you here. We'll make a start straight away. I mean, I'll just have a few discussion points I'd like to have with yourself and maybe a few questions, mainly to do with your role, as you mentioned, but also with in this case, in the FutureTech Summit, you were the chair of the summits. As the chair, how did you find the summits? You know, you've been involved in construction and digital construction for a while. How did you find the summit this year?
So first of all, it was an absolute honor to be asked to chair such a prestigious event. And as you see and you will have heard, the participants were very, very prestigious in their attendance. And so I was super nervous to begin with, and that's quite rare for me because I've done this type of thing before, but never chaired the whole event. And one of the things that really stood out was the diversity of the speakers. And that was, I think, reflected in the audience too, not just in terms of from the different types of organizations that they all came from, but also the countries and especially the gender. I think Rubina and Becky, who organized this event, did a fantastic job in making sure that we didn't just have panels, basically, right? Panels which are just full of men. And we had a very fair representation of women, although there's still some work to do. But I think we ended up having a third of the participants on the stage that were females. So I think that was a great achievement. The other thing that really stood out for me was having so many government entities represented. We had keynotes from Dubai Municipality and the RTA. We had participation in the panels from both of those entities, as well as DIWA, Sharjah Technology and Innovation Park, and the Dubai Department for Economic Development. So it was great to see that representation from the government level, because as you know, a lot of the construction work that happens in the region is led by the government entities. We also had great representation from some of the large-scale projects happening over in Saudi Arabia, so Red Sea Development, Amala, just to name a few. And so from that perspective, again, it was an absolute honor to have been part of this.
Yeah, it was absolutely great, and as you said, the mixture in the event did give us quite a good understanding of what's going on in different perspective from government and etc. Now you've mentioned the different panels and etc. Could you tell us more about what kind of panels took place, the topics or the discussion points, and mainly what discussion points were there in these panels?
Yeah, so I think we started off the day with some keynotes from the government entities, and there we were talking about how digital was being, digital technology and digital transformation was being adopted within these organizations. So we heard from the Dubai Municipality, who are setting themselves up as a leader, particularly in building information modeling. So they talked about their BIM roadmap, and how they're working with industry partners and stakeholders and the supply chain to ensure that the communication of the digital roadmap is effective, but also the implementation. Then we had the keynote from the RTA, who were talking about, again, building information modeling, but this time in the context of infrastructure, so roads and transportation, and the successful delivery there were some case studies about how these roadmaps were implemented on things like the metro extension and some of the road projects. And then we had a number of panels. There was a panel around the importance of national mandates to help deliver national visions. So we were discussing how some of these are critical actually in ensuring that digital transformation is adopted and the future technology that are implemented by the people who deliver the projects for these clients. And so on that first panel, after the keynotes, we had a great representation from government entities. So we had representation from DEWA and RTA, the Sergeant Research and Technology Innovation Park, Dubai Municipality, and we were discussing how the government working hand in hand with the supply chain to set out the agenda and then to deliver the agenda was really important, and how actually having the mandate, so setting out descriptive requirements at the client government level ensured that the sort of successful deployment of technologies. Then we had a great presentation from the Red Sea Development Company. I think David Glennon over there is doing a fantastic job at really driving the digital agenda on one of the most prestigious and historic projects this region has ever seen. There's a huge sustainability and conservation effort happening on that project. And he talked about how technology is helping to drive that and to deliver that. Again, what was great to see is that, and this was something that really stood out across the entire sort of day, was that it's no longer theory. What we're seeing is actual examples of where this technology, and I know the title of it was future technology, but actually this is technology that's being deployed as we speak. So it's no longer thinking about things in the abstract or theoretically. It's stuff that's being delivered at the moment. And then there was a panel discussion on a really important topic, focusing around our people, looking at how we're going to have to change the sort of complexion and the demographic of the people that we employ in our industry. We've got an aging population, an aging workforce, which needs to be replenished. But that replenishment is actually going to probably be slightly different in terms of its skill sets, and that's going to be heavily impacted by technology. And so there was a great panel around that and the impacts of the pandemic, as well as the impacts of the aging sort of workforce. And then the final one, again, was around people and what do we need to do to help attract and retain that next generation of technology leaders within our industry. And the final the final session, the final panel of the day was focused all around sustainability, and particularly the circular economy, how digital tools and digitalization can help with the circular economy. So you can see we had a great sort of variety and diversity of speakers and topics across the day.
Indeed, sounds like it. Sounds like there was a lot of discussion about that. And for those that missed the event, we do have a white paper that's currently being drafted and will be published. That white paper should give you the background about the event itself and what's happening at the moment, what would happen, the kind of topics that has been discussed.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the white paper? Because I know after the event, you kind of sat down with some of the participants as well as some of the audience members, and so you would have got a really good insight into what they felt and how they felt the event went, as well as what they thought some of the key sort of takeaways were. So tell us about what's coming up in this white paper.
Yeah, absolutely. So as just to echo what you said, the summit had a lot of attendees and a lot of participants from government, from industry, from academia, from different parts of the world as well. So it gave us quite a lot of notes to take and a lot of information to think about and to put it together for this white paper. From the discussions that happened during the summit, but also the follow-up discussions as well. Mainly the three, I would say there was three main topics that we took away from that. other than the fact that there was topics discussed about technologies, and there was discussions about AI and IoT and blockchain, as well as obviously 3D printing and BIM, obviously, for those who were talking about their past experiences and etc. But the main three elements that we took away from that day, and this is what the white paper is centered around, is a collaboration, people, and sustainability. When I talk about collaboration, we were talking about different aspects of PPP, but more importantly, there was a touch on something quite interestingly being developed across the world, and here it's been used in a number of projects, etc. And this is the collaboration when it comes to triple helix, which is basically government, industry, academia working together to come up with different solutions and tackling the challenges that we have within certain projects or initiatives, or even national projects as well. When it comes to people, there was a lot of discussions, as you mentioned, Prakash, rightly. The fact that we have a shortage, the challenge, especially lesson learned from the journey of BIM, and how this journey in BIM made us realize that we need people from different industries, whether it's they are working in their industry in technologies and etc. and change management and etc. But also the fact that we need people from the computer science and AI and etc. to come into the industry, not just to help us achieve what we want to achieve, but also innovate further. And that was the great need, and there was a lot of discussions. Again, the white paper will cover that in terms of the future skills and the kind of skills that needs to be available. Obviously, by discussing that, there was a touch on the next 50 years strategy for UAE, and how UAE is looking at the leaders of the future, and how the construction especially will have an impact on this, and hopefully these new leaders coming into the construction industry will have the right skills and the mindset, as I said, not only to solve the problems of implementing tech at the moment, or the future tech that we have, but also actually coming in with a fresh mind and mentality and innovate within. The last and not least topic that we took away from the day was sustainability, again for the obvious reasons, and there was a touch on and people looking forward for the COP26 and the discussions that will happen for the COP26, which will have an impact on construction, and it is already. But there was a lot of talk about sustainability, and how sustainability being put in the middle of a number of visions and strategies of a number of projects, and how sustainability is being achieved through the utilization of technology, whether it's from early stages where we can design in a better way, in a more sustainable way, or utilizing better and sustainable material for our projects, all the way to having technologies during the maintenance and operations and management of the assets. How can we make sure that we have the right decisions made from the data that we're going to have, whether it's from digital twinning or BIM and etc., and how that would help us to achieve certain sustainability goal, whether it's decarbonization or managing our carbon emissions on site, or even after, which is the build and maintenance and operation phase.
And those were the things that really stood out for me, being on stage, right? And so even when we were preparing for this and looking at the topics that we were trying to put together, I think that we kind of had an inkling of where the direction of the sort of day would go, and where the discussions would go. So if we take each one of those separately, we'll start with collaboration. Certainly, I know the panel that I hosted was all around delivering national visions, and the thing that came out from every one of the speakers, and especially from the government entities, is the need for collaboration between public and private entities. And you mentioned the triple helix there, and of course the academia element obviously comes in there. And so going forward, in terms of ensuring that technology is taken up by the industry, I think it's going to be important that there's a partnership between those three to ensure that we have successful deployment and engagement from the people. Because look, you can have the best technology in the world, right? You can have the best or the most innovative solutions, but if the people don't use it, it's completely useless. So the key theme, I think, from one of the key takeaways from that particular panel was the need for clear communication about what the vision is, why you're doing it, and not just deploying technology for technology's sake. So I think that collaboration element, and I think it also came up the day before in the Construction Leaders Summit as well, right, where they were talking about much more clear communication between all the different stakeholders. I think Kes Taylor had this analogy around being in a fish tank, which I remember was really good, and that everybody needs to think about this as a fish tank. And the clearer the water is, the better chance we all have of survival and being able to feed ourselves and things like that.
Absolutely, transparency was definitely something that was touched on the summit before and the FutureTech summit as well. Mainly, as you said, and as discussed in the first panel, was to do with helping the government to achieve certain goals and etc. And we see this quite a lot now. We saw this in the UK during the development of the Digital Built Britain, or even more recently, the developments of the construction playbook, where there was pretty much everyone from every single angle was involved in the development of this. And now we saw this in UAE during the development of the UAE National Smart Construction Guideline. During that development of that particular guideline, there was a number of entities being involved. And the reason behind this really is because there's a lot of research and theory that happens from researchers in academia, or even people that are working within the R&D aspect. And then we've got the other side, which is the industry, who's in day out working on a number of projects that are trying to achieve certain issues or address certain challenges, and know and have the know-how, and they're the ones who are really going through the practical issues and trying to resolve them. And also you got the government of those sides who's trying to build some sort of national visions in order to achieve national strategies and address these challenges from a national level. And all of these entities working and talking together from early stages will avoid the different mandates where you have government coming in saying you must do this and this and this, and then you got the industry not really agreeing to it, or the industry trying to really achieve something and not getting the right support and the right incentives from the government. And we see this quite a lot of sustainability, but also from the academic perspective, we've got a number of academics doing a lot of research and etc. That will have a great impact, but it's not being passed on to the industry or the government, and it just ends up really great work that is just ink on paper. And this is where we really need to have that collaboration in place, and this is what's been highlighted. And we could say that everyone now around the table, and this is proven from the discussions we had in the FutureTech, especially in the first panel, collaboration is a must. It's not an option anymore. It's not a luxury that we should have. It's something that we must do in order to address the challenges that we have in the construction industry.
Yeah, definitely. And then now onto the other bit that you mentioned around people. So I think technology and people is it's a touchy subject, right? When people are talking about introducing technology, and this has happened through sort of human history, right? Every time there seems to be this industrial revolution, which is driven by some sort of innovation or technology, there's always this something bordering on mass hysteria about the fact that it's going to take away people's jobs and what are people going to do, and always we seem to evolve, right? The labor force evolves, and we're having a similar sort of debate within our industry at the moment as things like AI, machine learning, robotics, and automation are starting to take hold. There is this concern that people are going to start losing jobs, or that these things are going to take over and people are not going to have work. But I think but taking that into context, we just mentioned before that we've actually got a labor shortage within the industry, and there'll be some jobs and certain skill sets which, if we don't do something about, will become extinct, just because the people are not coming through and educating themselves in these skill sets. And there, I think there's the opportunity for technology to bridge that gap. There's also an opportunity to use technology to help train the next wave of people. So I'm seeing more and more now the uses of things like augmented reality and virtual reality to help train people in a much more intuitive way, in utilizing a much more immersive experience to help quickly and effectively train people. So I think that was another thing that really came up, that yes, I think there is a skills shortage, and there's also demand from new skills. I think you mentioned some of these before, and a lot of them are technologically driven. So we're starting to employ people like data scientists, data visualization specialists, gaming developers, for example, to visualize some of the things that we build, AI and ML specialists, to build certain models to predict things that are going to happen, or to start capturing and analyzing the data that we've got. So the people side of things is really, really interesting and double-sided. So through the people that you spoke to, Anas, did you get the sense that people are fearing technology, or did your general consensus was that they're looking to embrace it and see it as part of the solution?
I must say that the people fearing is a lot less than how it used to be before. It's during COVID, I think a lot of people have moved away from fearing technology and etc. I mean, I remember many years ago when we were trying to implement, maybe 15 years ago, we were trying to implement BIM on a project. We had people that don't even use emails. They were still trying to use faxes on projects and etc. So these kind of people that were pushing away from it is just because, for a number of reasons. One of them is that they saw technology as complicates things and really didn't see the purpose behind utilizing these kind of technologies. But also because some people were a little bit arrogant around technology, and therefore didn't really understand why do we need it. And you got the third part of people where they know what it could do and etc., but they were just scared out of confusion, etc., that it would take over the jobs and etc. And we saw that when BIM was introduced many years ago. Quantity surveyors were totally against it. They thought, okay, I'm everything that I'm going to do from quantity takeoffs and etc. is going to be automated. And then these same people have utilized these technologies to bring them into the journey. Not only that, but they help them do their jobs in a better way. Mm-hmm. Technology have been understood in a different way now. The people have really started to embrace it rather than trying to push it away. And as I said, during COVID, we had people that were against or didn't even think about utilizing technology to meet up with others, especially for site meetings and etc. And here we go. Because of COVID, we were forced to, and people are a lot more open towards that idea. That, I think, have helped us to take it to the next level and say, right, you see, during COVID, if we didn't have a digital twin of buildings, if we didn't have BIM, if we didn't have this, if we didn't have that, life would have been a lot more difficult. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, COVID will go away soon, but the technology is here to stay, and we want to make sure that we utilize that technology to really move on to the next levels. So utilizing AI to help us with designs and etc., utilizing IoT on sites to understand certain things that's happening on site, to collect certain data and utilize that data for the benefit of the whole construction cycle. Now, there was a few discussions or side discussions about the technology being not able to match the way we work, which is another issue that we have. The fact that the construction industry is built in a certain way, where we have consultants, we have contractors and subcontractors and a developer almost policing the whole project and etc. And now there's a lot of people that are still reluctant against when it comes to technology, again, for reasons that it shouldn't be, around transparency that you mentioned earlier, around having certain things being tracked and etc. But now, as I said, this is moving away, especially with the PPP projects, with the framework agreements, with the new contract agreements, etc. that's been in place, where we really need to work collaboratively to achieve the same goal, which is the completion of projects and achieving certain challenges, which is productivity and performance on projects, sustainability on projects, and well-being on projects. If we focus on these kind of things, then we see the right people utilizing the right technologies in order to make sure that we are productive throughout the project, whether the designs are productive, or the way we manage our projects are productive, or even the sequencing and the planning of the project is a lot more productive in that way. When it comes to well-being, we could talk for days about how technology can help us with well-being, whether it's wearable technologies, whether it's systems that we can have in place to induct people the right way, and etc. And obviously sustainability, as I mentioned, there's a lot of technologies that were discussed in order to achieve sustainability goals and etc. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because people are already starting to understand that, and people, as you mentioned, have realized that we need to bring in the right skill sets in place, and the purpose behind that is hopefully not to repeat what we had to some extent during the BIM journey, where we've had a BIM team that's doing everything that's to do with BIM, and you still have the project team executing things separately and etc. and almost not talking to the BIM team. Now we see the technology being integral. So you see project managers being utilizing technologies. You see the design team, construction team, quantity surveyors, and even developers and the clients themselves utilizing these technologies to understand certain things within their projects.
Yeah. And as people become more exposed to it, they'll increasingly start demanding it, right? When you become exposed to it and you see the benefits of it, when you move from project to project or from country to country, you can start demanding it of the wider team, of the organizations that you work for, and that helps to sort of really drive the deployment of certain technologies. And then just whilst we've got a few more minutes, the final topic was, or the final finding came out, was around sustainability. And you mentioned a couple of things just there around wellness and the need to have a sustained labor market and things like that. These are all elements of sustainability. I think people forget. We kind of get sustainability as a word kind of gets greenwashed, right? And everyone sees sustainability as synonymous with the environmental sustainability and the environmental impact, which is great, which is the impact that we're having as an industry is massive on sort of climate change and things like that. And a lot of what's being discussed at COP26 is around that, and how as an industry, we can help to reduce our impact and our carbon emissions. But increasingly, we are starting to see some of these other topics mentioned, like wellness. And what we're seeing, particularly at JLL, is that assets that have this in mind actually are achieving better rental yields and better prices in the market. So it's actually becoming economically beneficial to have more sustainable buildings, buildings that care about its occupants. I think I read an article the other day saying that the biggest commodity in real estate at the moment is fresh air. So buildings are being tracked on the quality of the air that's inside. And a lot of these solutions to make buildings more sustainable, whether that's environmentally more sustainable or more sustainable for the people that live in them, are technologically driven. A lot of the technology is being driven in the equipment that goes in there, the monitoring of the building itself, whether that's from the thermal comfort or the air quality or the temperature, the humidity, and all of these things, and then creating a digital twin, as you mentioned before, of an asset to understand how it's working, how it's operating, how its occupants are using it. And I think the sustainability and technology are intrinsically linked. In order to achieve one, you need the other. And so one of the things that really came out, particularly on the discussion around the circular economy, is that we shouldn't see technology just as an enabler. It's actually essential for us to deliver some of the sort of circular economy and sustainability goals. Again, was that something that was reflected in the conversations that you had?
Absolutely. There's definitely a lot more discussions when it comes to sustainability, that we started to add in the well-being now, green or carbon emissions, or even sustainable development or well-being. It's all gathered under one umbrella at the moment, and which is a good thing. And technologies have shown, and this is the number of discussions that happened during the summit or during the event. There was a lot of discussions in regards to how technology can help us with that. Now, without trying to finish on a bad note, but construction does have huge challenges when it comes to well-being and sustainability, and hopefully technology can help with that.
Yeah, well, if there's a challenge, there's a huge opportunity there as well, right? And so that's, I guess, that we can end that on a call to arms, right, from our industry. So how we can become much more sustainable in all forms, not just environmental. Thank you, Anas, for taking part in this. I'm really looking forward to reading the white paper once it's finalized and comes out, and as I'm sure many of our listeners are too. So I think we're going to move on to a Q&A session now, and so happy to take any questions from the audience.
Well, a fantastic session there, and the key highlights of the Big 5 Future Tech Summit. Thank you so much. And we are joined by Prakash Senghani and Dr. Anas Bataw. Thank you so much for staying back to answer all of our audience questions. And I must say, it's been great seeing how many people from around the world are tuning in as well. So thank you so much for being with us here today. Yes, we've had quite a few that have come in, actually. The first one is, feel free for anyone to take this. What were the top 3 technologies discussed at the summit, and how are they really impacting the future of the industry? Who would like to take that first?
Should I take it, Anas?
Oh. Yeah, go ahead. So
I think the top 3, the one that was discussed most was digital twins, and that's not a technology in its own right, but it's I guess a philosophy around how technology comes together to create a digital representation of a physical asset. So as a trend, as an overarching philosophy, I think digital twins was one that came up again and again. The other one was IoT sensors, and that's kind of linked to digital twins, but it's also got a link to sustainability. So IoT devices which are capturing information both during construction and through the operational phase. And the other one I think a lot of people talked about was reality capture. So the uses of more sophisticated cameras, laser scanners, and drones to capture more information both during and at the end of a construction project.
Anna, did you want to add to that? Sorry.
Well, absolutely. These were the technologies that were mentioned and discussed that are current trends. There was one technology that was discussed and mentioned as some sort of, everyone knows it's coming, but there's a few challenges, which is 3D printing.
Yeah.
There's obviously the obvious reason why is because 3D printing, obviously, it's been mandated in Dubai, and it is coming. And you've got the likes of RTA and Dubai Municipality, etc., looking at ways to lead the way as they always do when it comes to these kind of mandates from the government. But there's a lot of question marks when it comes to 3D printing. So it was highlighted, but as a future trend that needs to be considered today.
Moving on to our next question now. How can we improve transparency to further collaboration?
I'll take this one, Prakash, if you don't mind, and then I'm sure you'll have a lot more to add into it. So transparency, and we discussed this in yesterday's call as well. There was a lot of discussions around transparency, and the main reason behind that is there's a lot of challenges that we have during the construction project, but during the whole life cycle of the project, from early stages all the way to handover and even after handover. So there's the transparency aspect was touched on as one of the main issues that we do have within the construction industry because of the way the teams are set up and the way the projects are set up in the contracts. However, the technology has been highlighted as a solution to this transparency issue. Instead of trying to force people to share things or get out of the comfort zone, having collaborative platforms, common data environments, and etc., has and will continue to help us with being a little bit more transparent. And it was identified, especially in the summit, as a form of really changing people's mindsets to, oh, I can't share my specifications of the design as a consultant. And this topic or this question or this confusion was something that was highlighted for many years. But when the likes of BIM and etc. came in place, and the CDE platforms that came with BIM and the processes and workflows and etc., have really allowed people to do it, and it just became a norm now.
Yeah, I completely echo and agree with what Anas is saying. And I think the other thing, Anas, as well, is that the software companies are also becoming more transparent and allowing their platforms to be more integrated and integratable. So we've seen the rise of the API, the application protocol interfaces and programming interfaces, allowing different software programs to essentially talk to each other, push and pull data from different systems. And I think that's been a real change, and that's going to further help with the transparency, where we've got multiple systems that each of them are good at what they do, but then they talk to each other to give you a holistic solution.
Right, move on to our next question now. How has the pandemic, obviously a very hot topic, how has the pandemic given digital and technology professionals more of a voice then? What do you think on that?
So I think almost every single event, both during and after, has been talked. The pandemic's been talked about as a key driver for digital transformation in the industry. I kind of disagree that it's been the only thing. I think that we were really pushing on just before the pandemic hit. And yes, of course, the pandemic accelerated the sort of push towards digitization. But I think the biggest thing that I've seen is as we had to digitize, because we had to work remotely and we had to come up with more innovative ways of working out how we deliver our projects, both from a design perspective and from during the construction. What that meant was that digital practitioners like ourselves were suddenly given a voice at the top table, right? Where we were all of a sudden not just this niche department that sometimes was rolled out for marketing purposes or just to show that you were an innovative company. Now it was genuinely we were being asked for our advice for operational efficiencies, for them to become business as usual. And I think post-pandemic, that's going to stick. Now that we've got this voice, now that we've got this seat at the table, we're going to keep it, and we're going to continue to push for the digitization of the industry.
Dennis, your thoughts on the pandemic as well? Do you think that it's given professionals more of a voice? Do you think that?
Absolutely. It's as an example, we've had sites shut down, and there was a lot of people that not so much into technology before COVID had to turn to, as Prakash rightly mentioned, to the geeks in the corner to find solutions. And this is not just to do with digital transformation, which is utilizing BIM and GIS and etc., but also utilization of just normal calling platforms and etc., video call platforms. This was never something that anyone would ever use during construction, especially on the construction site. Although some of the rooms are highly equipped by the IT departments, we don't tend to use them. But we always want to meet people face to face and etc., especially on site, and go around the site and look at the issues there. And a lot of, well, let's put it this way: IT departments have been very busy during the pandemic, but what they did was really just activate what they already had there in place. Some of the architecture and infrastructure was already existing, but also the digital delivery teams, which is the BIM and the GIS and etc. They also got really busy because they had to provide a digital replica of the sites.
Because so many industries really have had to innovate, haven't they, and think on their feet and adapt immediately, which has been very difficult, but that's where the technology comes in, of course, which has been brilliant. Our next question, are there any specific sustainable technologies manufactured in the UAE? That's our next question.
Specific technology manufacturers. There is
I know. There's a lot of happening in sort of desalination, water desalination, and making that much more environmentally friendly. So there's two aspects of that. There's obviously the energy input that goes into it. So sourcing the energy that basically gives us our running water in Dubai and the Middle East more broadly. Using seawater to turn that into water that we use to in our taps and to water our plants and things like that. So the energy required to create that coming from sustainable sources, but then also the effluent that comes out. So essentially the waste product that comes out of that, making sure that we're not putting that back into sea and doing other things for it, reducing that waste. I think those are two real technologies that are being spearheaded in the UAE and more broadly in the region.
Very, very exciting, especially for the UAE, of course, as well. Now we move on to our next question. Now, there's been also an announcement, a 4+ rating announcement for Dubai in terms of sustainability. Maybe you can fill us in a little bit more on that. And what sort of part do you think that technology can play in supporting greener buildings off the back of this announcement then?
Yeah. Well, this announcement is quite fresh, so there's a lot to unravel from now. I'm sure it will. But in general, is a 4-star rating with a 4+. This is to really incentivize building owners. I think last time I checked, there was something around 18,000 buildings out there in Dubai. It's about time that we have some sort of rating. I think it's quite an innovative way of doing that as well. Not just to look at buildings during the construction, which is another issue that we have when it comes to sustainability and etc. And I'm sure we've got the likes of LEED and BREEAM and etc. And arguably we need to look at ways of how we can even add on to them to achieve better targets when it comes to sustainability in construction, including recycling, etc. But this particular one actually looks at buildings during the operations and facility management, etc. And I think this is really, really interesting because there's one thing which is the capex aspect of things, but when it comes to the opex, there's this sustainability becomes a luxury that a lot of building owners or facility owners or operators do. Some of us in particular look at these kind of stuff. I personally have been forced by my wife looking at we'll only live in buildings that do recycling of waste, and hopefully this will with these kind of ratings we'll see a lot more people or a lot more buildings allowing for things like recycling, allowing for things like nature-based solutions such as green roofs or green walls and etc. Utilizing sensors for lights and water, maybe not in people's apartments for residential, but for offices. I think that's low-hanging fruits that should be done, and the list goes on. Looking at the announcement, it is led through sustainability, which is really good. There was a lot of specialists in the sustainability field that was involved in this again, which is brilliant. It's good for them to be heard and for them to have some points to be reflected in that. And I've heard that the criteria of these star ratings are mainly led through sustainability and well-being, which is something that we really look forward to.
Yeah, and I think this is a formalization of a trend that we've been seeing, particularly post-pandemic, where with JLL, we did a study last year, I think in some of the major capital cities around the world, and we saw that buildings that were perceived to be more sustainable, and not just from an environmental perspective, but from a user's comfort, so air quality, thermal efficiency, and those where these buildings that were perceived to be more sustainable were actually yielding much higher returns, both from a rental perspective and from a sale perspective. And so I think having a formalization and a rating system for buildings will help and provide a financial incentive. You mentioned the OPEX. But this will provide a financial incentive to do some of this. And also, I think there is a bit of a misconception that sustainability costs money. If you're more energy efficient in your building, your energy bills will come down, right? And we're definitely seeing more and more asset owners coming to us, asking us to do energy audits, sustainability audits, and helping them to optimize their assets. And this is a trend that sort of started before, one of these ones that started before COVID and has just been accelerated through COVID. And the technologies that can be used to help get your rating up are increasing all the time. So the use of sensors, more intelligent lighting, like you mentioned, smart meters. You're starting to see smart meters. So even like your in Dubai, your bills, your DEWA bills, if your water usage goes up all of a sudden compared to your average, you get a text message, right? And that's purely down to having a smart meter telling you that, we think that there's something going wrong here. So all of these things are going to start helping us to be more sustainable. And if you've got like a league table or competition around trying to get a higher star rating, similar to ones that we have when we're booking hotels, for example, we tend to pay more if we want to go and stay in a 5-star hotel. We'd probably pay more rent to go and stay in or go and live or work in a 4+ building.
I've heard rumors that this will be put into the hotel booking systems. That's what I've heard. Just how you have that with the likes of Skyscanner for when you book an airplane, or if you book it to travel, it tells you which one's the most sustainable solution or option. I think apparently...
Fantastic idea. Absolutely brilliant. And yeah, these rating systems really are the perfect incentives, aren't they, to do the right thing, and just generally across the board. It's brilliant. Moving on, we are running out of time, sadly. So I'm just going to quickly go on to our next question here. With digital twin gaining an interest, a lot of data are coming from physics code in particular, and serving from an energy model not well integrated actually in the virtual digital twin. I hope that makes sense. Do you think that an effort is necessary in data exchanges? I mean, similarly of what has been done for BIM, or is the actual strategy enough? Does that make sense to you?
Kind of. I think so. I think what we're trying to say is the digital twin at the moment is something that's being popularized over the last year or so. Every single event that I'm attending at the moment and speaking to, it has got something around digital twins, and it's actually an evolution of BIM. I see it as the next evolution of BIM, utilizing your BIM models during construction to give you better insight of how your construction site is progressing and meeting the needs during that phase, and then utilizing some of that base data, particularly some of the geometric data and the data that's associated with the plant and equipment that you install, to help operate your asset much more efficiently and more effectively and more sustainably. Of course, there's going to be a need to standardize, but I think some of those requirements to standardize have already started. And we've got things like COBE, which is a data schema that starts collecting data in a standardized format to help when you're handing over information at the end of a project to be able to operate that asset. So all of these types of things, as they evolve and become much more mature, and people's definitions of digital twin start to coalesce and crystallize, we'll automatically start seeing standardizations of some of these sort of data schemas.
Absolutely. What effort do you think is necessary then when it comes to sort of data exchange as well?
Well, absolutely. The journey that we had with BIM, it's not just a journey that allowed us to bring in technology to construction industry, but also allowed us to look into things like standardization of data, how data flows, the workflow, the processes, the procedures, etc. It changed a lot of, as I said, the mindset. It changed things when it comes to contracts and etc. So the journey that we had with BIM, although you might argue and say, no, it's two different softwares or whatever, that's right. But it's a continuation of the journey that we had with BIM. The data that we generate during the design and construction of a project has to be embedded or integrated to the digital twin. And from the digital twin, look at it this way. Digital twin is basically you've got your actual data that's coming from the building, which should come from your BIM model. And then you've got all your IoTs and AIs and etc. on top of that will monitor the actual data for day in, day out of the building and connect that building to other buildings throughout the city and etc. And that's how you have the digital twin. Now, to achieve that, you can't just start from, and I've seen that in a few occasions, people would achieve digital twin. They don't look into the fact that this building was handed over. There's an asset information model, or if there's even a model of information that was developed during the project, and they try and do things from scratch. And this is where they get the issues. Trying to replicate the whole building and digitize it first before you start collecting live data on it and try and use the digital twin platforms to analyze the data and react according to that, et cetera, it's going to be impossible. The only way to do it is to carry on from the same workflows that we have with BIM. Obviously, evolve these, as Prakash rightly mentioned, and there's a lot of efforts in regards to that. But the structuring of the data, the language of the data, the process and the workflows and etc. already exist, and arguably exist all the way to handover of a project. And perhaps we need to develop that further for the data management and etc. for after that. But it's definitely there or thereabouts, and it's we've come a long way through the BIM journey, so we should just continue with that.
Well, thank you so much. That was our final question, actually, from our audience. So, Prakash, Dr. Anas, it's been a fantastic speaking with you. Thank you so much for such an insightful discussion there. We really do appreciate your time. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we move on now to our project outlook. That is, in fact, going to start at 12:10 Gulf Standard Time, which is in about 15 minutes' time. So we'll see you at 12:10 for our project outlook with Edward James, Director of Content and Analysis at Me Projects. See you then.